This is part one of the shiur that I delivered Monday evening, December 20th, 2021. I originally recorded I thought I was recording the shiur in the OT-based medrash, but I realized, and after about 15 minutes, that I forgot to press the start button. So this is the first part of the shiur. The second part is recorded in the OT-based medrash that was the live shiur. And for those of you who are listening to this part one, I'll be sending part two as well with a separate link. So Payam Hanian, the president of our shul, asked a terrific question to me, and that is that how was Yosef able to swear to Yaakov? Yaakov said, ask Yosef, make sure to take me, to bury me in Eretz Yisrael and not in Mitzrayim. So Yosef said, Anochi esek kidvarecha. And then Yaakov said to Yosef, Vayomer hishavali vayishavalo. Swear to me, and Yosef swore to Yaakov that he would bury him and take him to Eretz Yisrael. So Payam asked that in order for Yosef to go to Eretz Yisrael, he had to have permission from Paro. And in fact, Rashi says that the only reason why Paro agreed to let Yosef leave Mitzrayim is because of the shvuah that he made to that he made to his father. That's what Rashi says. If you look on page 6 of the booklet, I believe, Rashi says in the bottom left-hand corner, the second paragraph up, if not for the shvuah, I wouldn't have allowed you to leave. And that's what the Chumash means, that Paro, Paro said you could go like you swore. So it was only because he swore that Paro allowed him to go. So the question is that a decision of Paro's was not under the control of Yosef. So how could Yosef make a shvuah if it requires the acquiescence of another party for the shvuah? Now you might say that well, so what? So what if somebody else has to be involved? It still should be a valid shvuah, to the extent that the person is able to do it. He's obligated to do it. To the extent that he can't do it, if he needed a haskama from Paro, so he's not accountable for that. But the rest of the shvuah he's accountable for. But the reason why this question is such a good kasha is because it's supported by a statement made by Rashi in Masechah Shvuos and Daf Chaf Hey. Rashi says on the bottom of the first page, the Gemara says, Itmar shvuah shezarak ploni tzror liyam v'shelo zarak. If a person made a shvuah that somebody threw a rock into the sea, or he did not throw a rock, so Rabba Mechayev v'shmuel repater. Rabba Mechayev isei belav v'hein. There's a requirement that in order for a shvuah to be valid, it has to be something, to state, whatever statement you're making has to be an acceptable shvuah if it was reversed. If it's I will do, so it has to be able to be reversed to I won't do. If it's I won't do, it has to be reversible to I will do. So Shmuel said, well, as long as it can be reversed, it's a valid shvuah. But Rab said, Shmuel said that you're chayiv, because you could reverse it. But Shmuel says, Pater leisi b'lahaba, that Shmuel says that it's not enough that you can reverse it between positive and negative, but it also has to be reversed between present and the future. So this shvuah that a person makes, saying that Ploni Zarak Tzror Liyam, there was some fellow threw a rock into the sea, it can't be reversed. It can't be reversed to the future. If you would say, this person is going, I swear that this person is going to throw a rock into the sea, it's not a valid shvuah. So Rashi says, what does it mean it's not a valid shvuah? So Rashi says, Klomar, Yizik Ploni, Elo Yisrael. Ein Zeh Shvuas Bitui, Elo Shvuas Shav. Sharei Ein Ploni Rishuso Lizrok V'lo Lizrok. It's not a Shvuas Bitui, it's a Shvuas Shav. Because the person doesn't control whether a person throws or doesn't throw. Just to give a little bit background of what it means, a Shvuas Shav. There are two psukim in the Torah about not making shuas. One is it's on the first page. One is in Yisro, where it says, "Lo siso Hashem Hashem lekecho hashav." Do not use God's name in vain. And the second place that it appears is Lo sishavu b'shmi l'shaker in Parshas Kedoshim, that a person should not swear falsely. So there's two separate isurim. One is Shvuas Shav, and one is Shvuas Sheker. I'm just going to close the door because I see there's some noise. So what is the difference between Shvuas Shav and Shvuas Sheker? So the Rambam on page 2 has a long discussion of what's Shvuas Shav and what's Shvuas Sheker. Basically, he says is that Shvuas Sheker is where you say something and it is proven false. You say, I ate and you didn't eat, I did eat and I didn't eat. That is a Shvuas Sheker because it's a false statement. And Shvuas Shav, the Rambam gives 4 examples. It's a shvuah made in vain. So one example is that you make a shvuah about something that's obvious. You say a rock is a rock. The second one is if you make a shvuah on something that, I'm sorry. The first example the Rambam gives is that a person swears on something that's well known, and he says it's not. So he says a man is a woman, or a woman is a man. That he makes a shvuah. That's a shvuah shav, because everybody knows that a man is not a woman. The second example is if a person makes a shvuah of something that's obviously well known. That also is not considered to be a shvuah. That's a shvuah shav. The third example is he makes a shvuah not to do a mitzvah. Shvuah is not valid, so that's not a shvuah shav. That is a shvuah shav, rather. And the third and the fourth case is where a person makes a shvuah on something that he's not able to do. So in all these instances, shvuah shav, the idea is that the shvuah is meaningless. It has no impact, and it doesn't tell us anything new. It doesn't have validity. That's a shvuah shav. Even if it's false, what a person says. If a person says that a rock is a person, or a person's a rock, that is it's not a shvuah sheker. It doesn't fall into the category of shvuah sheker, even though it is sheker. It falls in the category of shvuah shav. So Rashi is saying that if a person says somebody's gonna do something in the future, nobody knows what's gonna happen in the future. So it's a meaningless shvuah, and therefore it's not a shvuah bitui. Shvuah bitui means a shvuah that's binding, but it's not a shvuah bitui. It's a shvuah shav because a person cannot guarantee what's going to happen in the future. Now, the truth is that the Rambam disagrees with Rashi, or there's a disagreement between Rambam and Rashi. I'm just adjusting the camera. There's a disagreement between Rambam and Rashi, because the Rambam, which you'll see on page, the Rambam is on page 6. The Rambam is somewhat difficult to follow. The Rambam, if you wish, you could read it yourself on page 6. But the upshot of what the Rambam is saying is that if a person makes a shvuah that a haba in the future, and he says somebody's going to throw something or somebody's not going to throw something, so if the person does not throw, then it's a shvuah shav, a shvuah sheker. The shvuah is held in abeyance until it's resolved whether in the future whether he throws or he doesn't throw. He said he's going to throw. So if he does throw, it's a valid shua. But if he doesn't throw, it's a shua sheker. That is determined in the future. The Rambam says you don't get malchus for that because you can't give a hasura. It's a hasura stuff because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. But the Rambam says, why isn't it a shua shav? You don't know what's going to be in the future. The Rambam says because it's possible that the person will do it. So therefore, if you say the person is going to throw a rock in the future, it's possible the person will throw a rock. So therefore, it's not a shua shav, according to the Rambam. So what you see is that the Rambam and Rashi are disagreeing about about this point, that according to Rashi, if you say somebody's going to do something in the future, that's a shua shav, whereas according to Rambam, if you say somebody's going to do something in the future, since it's possible that the person will do it and you can influence the person, it's not considered to be a shua shav. Now, I would explain, and the Rivash, which, again, if you want to look at it, is on page 5. The Rivash explains the Rambam at length, but that's basically what the Rivash says, and the Kesef Mishnah quotes the Rivash as well. I would like to offer an explanation to the machlokas between Rashi and the Rambam, and that is that Rashi holds that a shvua has to be binding. It has to be a shvua of a haba, a shvua of the future, has to have some consequence of what it's trying to accomplish. So just to say that somebody is going to do something in the future is not a shvua, because it doesn't accomplish anything. What difference does it make? It's of no consequence what's going to happen in the future, or not. It's just not only there's no consequence, but it's not. There's no imperative for the future. So Rashi holds, therefore, that's not called a shua shav. On the other hand, it is called a shua shav. On the other hand, the Rambam holds that if you make a statement about the future, then if it turns out to be true, it's not a shua sheker. If it's not true, it is a shua sheker. And the Rambam would hold, therefore, it would seem to me that he holds that it's not a shua shav, walking about the future, because just like you can make a shvua of accepting upon yourself to do something, there's also a shvua which is informative, of saying, yesterday 3 people came to my house. I swear the 3 people came to my house. But it doesn't impact, it's just informative. So the Rambam holds that just like there's an informative shvua in the present, there's an informative shvua in the future. How does the person know the future? He doesn't know the future, but he made a shvua, so it's considered to be a shvua. And therefore, whether or not the person violates the shvua, whether it's a shvua sheker, will depend on whether or not the person is actually, in the end, going to do what he said or not do what he said. So, if we go back to Payam's question really depends on this machlokas between the Rambam and Rashi. According to the Rambam, if a person says that somebody's going to do something in the future, it's not a shvua shav, because the person might do it. So there's no kasha why Yaakov asked Yosef to make a shvua, because it was not a shvua shav, even though the shvua has no. The shvua was that here's what we're saying. The shvua was that Yaakov should go bury Yosef. That Yosef should bury Yaakov in Eretz Yisrael. Part of that shvua is that Paro has to allow it. If Paro doesn't give his permission, then nothing is going to happen. So that part of the shvua, even though it is out of the control of the person who's making the shvua, that's considered to be a valid shvua according to the Rambam. Whereas according to Rashi, if a person says something about the future, that's not a shvua. There's nothing, because so therefore it's a shvua shav. So according to Rashi, when Yosef said to Paro that I'm going to I want to be buried, that I will bury you in Eretz Yisrael, according to Rashi, that's a shvua shav, because it's talking about the shvua on the future, and there's no control that a person has over the events of the future. So therefore, it would be a shvua shav. It's Paro, dealing with Paro, is making a shvua, which that I'll go to Eretz Yisrael, which entails having Paro agree is the same as making sure that you're saying somebody is going to do something in the future. Now, therefore, according to Rashi, it should be shiur shav. So then it's a tremendous kasha. How could Yosef have made that type of shiur? So in response, there is a sefer called Mrafsin Igra, and if you listen on the next tape, it says, I don't know who it is, but afterwards I was told by Evan Abraham that the sefer Mrafsin Igra was written by Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, who was a great gadol in Artzeli, who was in Nebrak. He was there a few years ago. So Rabbi Steinman asked this kasha, which is on page 3. He asked the kasha that how come Yosef was able to make a shiur? It's a shiur shav. So the Rabbi Steinman says that it's because the Yosef didn't mean that he's going to actually, his shiur was not that I'm going to bring the body to burial. The shiur was, I will try to bring the body to burial, and that has a din of a shiur. Okay, now you could please pick up on the next piece.